You probably didn't know they were there. Chemical plants in our area that use high-risk toxic materials in their manufacturing. Chemicals that, if leaked, in a worst-case situation, could harm thousands of people, young and old. Tonight, 5 on Your Side investigates how many of us may be living in the shadow of disaster. It's a sunny day in East St. Louis. But over at Dunbar Elementary, adults are learning about a shadow that some claim hangs over the school and its children.
Does it worry you that the possibility of
these babies being close to it? Yeah.
What's she talking about? Take a look. Dunbar is here, but less than a mile away are not one, but 2 chemical plants. And over here, another one. And just 7 miles south, yet another. All of them using high-risk toxic chemicals as part of their manufacturing. Chemicals that, in the case of a major leak, could mean disaster.
When they knocked the school down, they should have never even put that school back up. Not right here in this area by the chemical plant, by the railroad tracks. They never should have done it.
We're concerned about these chemical plants all across the country.
Abe Scar is the director of the Illinois Public Interest Group, or PIRG, a nonprofit that works in the public interest. And it's neighborhoods like this where this is not really unusual, is it?
Yeah, unfortunately, many chemical plants or other public health threats are often cited in low-income communities,
putting them at immediate risk if there's a large leak. Like at our plants, where one uses hydrofluoric acid and the other 3, sizable amounts of chlorine. To better understand the potential danger, just turn back the page 10 years.
911, what's your emergency?
I think there's been a train wreck. Oh, God, I smell smoke.
Okay, ma'am.
I got to get out of here.
On the morning of January 6, 2005, a Norfolk Southern train smashed into a parked rail car in Graniteville, South Carolina. The parked tanker ruptured, sending 11,500 gallons of poisonous chlorine gas into the air.
Shelter inside your home. Shut all windows and all ventilation systems.
5,000 residents had to be evacuated. Hundreds were hospitalized, and 9 people died. Even 10 years later, the survivors still struggle with breathing problems.
When inhaled, it can generate hydrochloric acid, which is very bad for the human system.
Dr. Jay Boris is the chief scientist with the Naval Research Laboratory in Washington, D.C.
And this is the plume shape that you will get.
He studies toxic chemical leaks and how they can affect cities.
This is a couple of miles east of downtown St. Louis.
We would probably be very late getting notified of any type of release of that magnitude.
For St. Louis City Fire Chief Dennis Jenkerson, response time is the biggest concern.
Eastside, quite a few volunteer fire departments that to have a specific hazmat team, they don't have one. So I would say for us to be notified and get into the mix of what's going on, I'll say 30 to 45 minutes.
Which Dr. Boris says is a problem.
3/4 of the people who were going to be casualties will already be casualties at that point, whether they're incapacitated or killed.
In 15 minutes.
In 15 minutes, yes.
And here's something else to consider. Story all have strong safety records, and although they declined to go on camera, they all sent similar statements that say in part that safety is their top priority and that they have drilled employees and work closely with area schools, first responders, and others to ensure immediate and appropriate action if an accident occurs. But in the meantime, Dr. Boris warns,
the real danger here, I think, that things happen so seldom of a serious nature that people tend to become complacent.
And back at Dunbar Elementary, the residents we spoke to said that living in the shadow of a potential disaster and not knowing anything is the most dangerous thing.
do you think that people have a right to know?
They have all the rights to know, especially if they have kids or elderly parent. They have the right to know.
Abe Scar and others say that chemical plants can often use alternative, safer chemicals in their manufacturing. They point to the Clorox Bleach Company, which stopped using chlorine to make their product at their U.S. facilities. In fact, Illinois PIRG and other groups hope that the EPA will make it mandatory that all plants use alternative chemicals when possible. Finally, if you'd like to read the entire statements from the plants in our story, just go to KSDK.com.
Yes, changed.
Some people hear birds in their backyard. Judy Studebaker hears trains.
I could get through sometimes a night not being, awakened, but now I can't.
On the tracks just beyond her fence in the Holly Hills neighborhood in South St. Louis, train traffic used to be light. But that all changed a few years ago when she noticed more and more freight trains passing by.
I started paying attention when I counted 130 big black bullet tankers coming through Holly Hills.
Studebaker soon learned that those tankers were filled with oil, but not just any oil, volatile Bakken crude oil.
Normally when they move a hazardous material, they're moving 1, 2, or 3 tank cars. They're not moving 100, 110, 112. These are mile-long cars full of an explosive.
In July of 2013, a train carrying Bakken crude derailed and exploded in a town in Canada's Quebec province, just across the border from Maine. 47 people died. In fact, since 2010, there have been 10 major accidents, from West Virginia to North Dakota. Just last March, just 350 miles from St. Louis, in the town of Galena, Illinois, a train with 103 cars of Bakken crude derailed. The fires went on for days, but fortunately in that instance, no one was hurt.
If we're having, 6, 7, 8, 9 accidents per year, at what point are we going to run out of luck and not have an accident like that occur in a densely populated area?
According to figures from the American Association of Railroads, there were 6,000 rail cars carrying crude in 2007. By 2013, the number was 400,000, an increase of more than 6,500%, and a $66 billion increase in profits for the top 7 railroads. The reason? Fracking, which has created a boom in the production of domestic crude oil.
You've got a huge amount of traffic in the 3rd largest rail hub in the U.S. in St. Louis. Kansas City is the 2nd, and Chicago is the 1st.
Eric Curdy is the administrator of railroads for the Missouri Department of Transportation. He says safety is MoDOT's #1 priority, not just for the Bakken crude, but all hazardous materials. In Missouri, there's more than 4,000 miles of track, and more material comes through Missouri than all but 3 states. What do you think needs to be done better to protect people?
Well, I think that the first responders is key. So if there is an incident, the folks on the ground, the boots on the ground, know what to do.
But are first responders getting enough information? Do they know when the trains are coming through populated areas and what's on those trains?
No. I mean, to ask me, do I know how many trains are coming through on a daily basis? I'll have to tell you no. I get information on what has passed through the city.
But not what's coming through?
No.
That's not to say there haven't been changes in the wake of all the accidents. Missouri State Senator Joe Kevney is on the Consumer Protection Committee.
Through negotiations and conversations, the railroads have agreed to only transport what they call residual cars through the neighborhoods.
Instead of carrying 30,000 gallons of Bakken crude, residual rail cars contain 3,000 gallons. And the Federal Railroad Administration recently ordered that older tank cars be phased out and replaced with new, thicker, safer ones by the year 2020. But U.S. Senator Dick Durbin says that's not fast enough, and he's sponsoring legislation to speed things up.
What we're trying to make sure of is those that are most vulnerable with railroads going through their community are the highest priority. In our part of the world, in the Midwest, that's almost every major city.
I mean, the unit trains are still coming through.
Back in Holly Hills, Judy Studebaker and her neighbors formed a group called St. Louis for Safe Trains. Every accident has them pushing harder for change.
If it were to happen anywhere along these tracks in our neighborhood, most of the neighborhood would be gone.
So you've made some headway.
Right.
Are you satisfied?
No, absolutely not. I want to see no trains going through Holly Hills.
In this neighborhood, a little progress is too little.
These trains should not be going through residential neighborhoods.
This train has been sitting here now for 4 days.
this train for 4
Yes, yes.
When Danelle Higdon moved onto Main Street in Wood River, Illinois, she knew her house was close to the railroad tracks. What she didn't know is that dozens of train cars full of dangerous chemicals would be parked on those tracks. Each one of these rail cars has the 1075 placard, which is the Department of Transportation's warning that they contain flammable gas. The gas is liquid petroleum, or LPG.
Surely they have somewhere to go if they're full of petroleum. Why do they just sit there?
It turns out that this is not out of the norm on Main Street.
I wasn't really too concerned about the fact that these were here. I couldn't tell you when they came in and when they're going to go out.
Gary Osborne says it's never really been a problem, which is a good thing, because in the shadow of those train cars is the William DeBell Achievement and Resource Center, a school for children with disabilities. He's the executive director.
I've been here since 1982, and we've never had any kind of exposure like that that I'm aware of.
The trouble is, not everyone has been so lucky. In 2013, a train carrying propane derailed and rammed into an apartment building in Russia, injuring 52 people. This 2014 blaze resulted in the evacuation of a town near the U.S.-Canadian border after the crash of a train with liquid petroleum gas. And one of the worst accidents in U.S. history happened in Wisconsin, when 7 cars with LPG caught fire, forcing more than 3,000 residents to leave their homes and causing nearly $20 million in damage. The train company, Norfolk Southern, wasn't involved with any of these accidents, but it is responsible for those petroleum cars sitting in Wood River. So we asked the company for an explanation and got this statement saying that safety is their highest priority and that the company complies with federal hazardous material rules. But the federal government isn't so sure about that. The Federal Railroad Administration sent 5 on Your Side Investigates this email saying in part that an FRA inspector discovered the potentially improper long-term storage of loaded cars carrying hazardous materials in Wood River, and that the agency is continuing our investigation and considering enforcement action. Enforcement action because federal law does not allow train companies to leave cars with hazardous materials sitting around outside their destination for more than 48 hours. Although officials say that rule has exemptions. Either way, it's not much comfort to Danelle Higdon.
I don't know if my house is going to blow up with me in it. I don't know if when my grandkids are over, if it's going to blow up with me in it.
Danelle Higdon says she is seriously considering a move off Main Street and away from those parked rail cars. In the meantime, she has a message for the train company.
You need to move your trains and consider the people that you're putting in danger.